So I'm going to be presenting on a special study that we recently completed with Kyle Hamilton and Scott Talmontes from Jacobs. So the goal of this study was essentially to look back on an old 2010 and 2011 special study. So yes, I'm presenting a special study on a special study. Yeah, definitely digging deep for some symposium material in this one. Even better, I'm actually representing a presentation that some of you may have already seen. Special thanks to Dave and for Kyle for pulling together this 2013 CASM presentation. I pretty much have stolen it and I'm going to represent it. Their original presentation was 30 minutes and I've got about 10, so I'm going to breeze through some things. Now, in 2019, I worked with Jacobs on a small maintenance effort on Rock Creek. And it turns out this was just upstream of one of the original kind of Rock Creek CIP projects that was part of this original kind of study case. And so the slide here shows kind of, actually I should add that Kyle was kind of the original one that kind of suggested this study. And really he wanted to look back on these logs, and I think it's a great idea. Definitely just a little bit of scope creep though. The slide here shows kind of the location of the two efforts. Timbers Creek is in the far southeast portion of the district, and that was originally done in 2010 and managed by Laura Krieger. And then the Rock Creek effort was in Superior on the northwest part of the district, and that was originally managed by Dave Skoudas. So the goals of the special study was just to look back on kind of the longevity of these logs, so the longevity. Thanks, Mary Powell, for suggesting that one. And then I guess I'd also add that there was originally a white paper pulled together for the Timbers project in 2010, but no paper was really pulled together for the Rock Creek effort. So I really wanted to kind of set these two projects up for continued success and monitoring. And so one of our goals was just to document the Rock Creek effort. And then really one of my goals with this is just to try to understand the longevity of these logs and try to get some confidence with how kind of log drop structures are used. I should add that the logs were tested using non-destructive methods. So we essentially tapped on the logs with a mallet to listen for kind of hollowness or any internal deficiencies, and then used a metal rod to kind of poke on the outside of the logs to see if they would deflect. The project is pretty much a little kid's dream. You get to go get paid to play in the creeks and while kind of whacking at things and poking at things. So sounds like a good day to me. So the first of the original projects was on Timbers Creek. Like I said, the white paper was pulled together, and that kind of did a good job of really talking about the basis of the design. And we've, for simplicity, just kind of appended that into the current report. And the log drop portion of this one essentially included 6 20-foot long cedar logs that were put into a drop structure that was fairly long and spaced out, but in total it covered about 6 foot of total drop. Now, unfortunately, a large storm came through that project right after it was kind of constructed, and so the project never really matured and the vegetation never took hold. And so ultimately they decided, instead of repairing and kind of going with the log drops moving forward, they really hardened up the structure with kind of grout cutoffs and grouted boulder edging. So moving into the future, we're no longer looking at the log drops themselves, just looking at the longevity of the logs. So here's a photo of what this drop looks like today. Notice the vegetation has come in and kind of really softened up the visuals. And here's some actual detailed kind of images of those cedar logs. On the far left there, you can note that kind of the cambium layer and the bark of those trees is kind of stripping off. And so I think this might be one of the actually more notable takeaways from this effort. If you do plan on grouting up against a tree, definitely consider kind of taking off that bark layer. It's going to disappear on its own either way. And then I think the other takeaway is that these logs are definitely starting to look a little sun-baked and maybe a little dried out. Keep in mind that this is a ephemeral creek, so the vegetation is much lower, it's not as vibrant, and so these logs are definitely exposed to much more sunshine. And one takeaway from the Marshall wildfire is that all the wooden retaining walls and wooden fences kind of disappeared. They burnt up and are gone. And so in a condition like this, these logs might actually burn up. Onto the Rock Creek. So this project was kind of a test case in 2 different scenarios. One was to test out logs in a perennial system as opposed to the ephemeral conditions at Timbers. And then the other was to use kind of multiple species of trees with really the goal that kind of local tree species would kind of show to stand the test of time. Here are photos of the actual logs that were used. So on the left there is a cedar log. That's kind of the material of choice because it is resistant to decay. That's why you have cedar fences, cedar shingles on your houses, but definitely not a local material and not cheap. Pine log is next. Some maybe thought of being a little bit more local, but as it turns out, if you order one of these from the timber yard, it's probably coming from Canada, so know where your logs are coming from. And then you got cottonwood logs. Cottonwoods are obviously a lot more prevalent in some of the open space areas that we're working in. Sometimes we're actually having to take them out. So it'd be great if we could reuse them in some of these log drop structures. Now, the problem with cottonwoods is that they often have a hollow core, and they're also typically made up of a softer wood, so kind of unsure if they're going to stand the test of time. And then for the purpose of this presentation, concrete is considered a log, so more to come on that later. The photos here are just right after construction and during construction. And I think the notable thing is that the kind of curved configuration of that cottonwood log definitely made for some difficulties in placing it. So straighter the better when it comes to placing your logs or choosing your logs. So this is what the drops look like today, or kind of recently, I guess. Definitely a perennial stream, so the vegetation has grown up around it and really overtaking the logs themselves. On the left there, you have the pine and the cedar logs, so no problems really whatsoever for them. We have even distribution of flows over the crest. Same log is being shown with those two photos of the cottonwood on the right. You'll notice that the flow is kind of concentrated to one side, and so that goes back to that curved alignment with the cottonwood tree, basically making for difficulty in getting that thing flat and the water evenly distributed over the crest. And so this log did kind of show some give when being pushed or poked out with that metal rod. And so, that wetting and drying cycles that we're seeing from that uneven distribution is probably going to shorten the service life of this log. Similar to the Timbers Creek project, all the bark is gone from these logs. And so the project did require some minor repairs on a few of the drop structures just to get water to basically go over the logs instead of under them. So definitely want to incorporate cutoffs into your design at the crest, and then really emphasize it during construction, make sure those contractors are kind of hitting the design. And here's how the logs were kind of kept in place, basically giant concrete blocks that they chained the logs to. I think the original line of thinking was that you could kind of take the chains off and swap out the log if you needed to. And the Jacobs team has kind of since suggested there's probably easier ways to anchor these logs in place. That's definitely discussed in the report. And finally, here's the photos of the concrete logs. The project essentially needed to incorporate sheet pile cutoffs into the design. And so they worked with Colorado Hardscapes to continue on with the log theme of the project. You can see that they've kind of added a rebar cage to the top of the sheet pile as well as a welded wire mesh. And that basically allowed them to shoot shotcrete and kind of shape it into the shape of a log. And then basically the crews came through and really textured and stained the shotcrete to look like an actual log. So here's what the logs look like right after construction. Definitely realistic, and I know that Dave Scudas thinks that this will be the one that lasts the longest. And I think he's right. One thing I'll point out is, this is right after construction. If you go out there today, you probably won't even be able to find this drop structure. It's just overgrown with willows and other vegetation due to the base flows. And so in talking with Dave, I think that the structure of this detail and cost is probably better used in other portions or in other areas where it's maybe going to be a little bit more appreciated by the general public. Now, finally, here are the actual conclusions from Dave and Kyle's original 2013 Castrum presentation. Generally speaking, I think all these conclusions hold true. One of the things I'd add is the speaker notes on the original presentation kind of questioned how they would define success. And at the time they defined success as having these structures in this project still functioning 50 years from when they installed it. And so in general, here's the lessons learned from this current effort, but I think 10 years down the road, it's looking like they're well on their way to that 50 years. The cottonwood tree probably needs to be monitored a little bit more closely. But I think we're well on our way. I'll check back in 10 years. Actually, hopefully not, but if you want to dig into more on this, and you want to learn more about kind of log drops, just go to our website. At the top of our website, there's kind of a little search bar there. Simply type in log drops, and you'll find our paper. I'll add this is also where I go to find other white papers on things such as full spectrum detention, EURV, void-fill riprap, those types of things. And then finally, I guess I'd just add that at the district, we really pride ourselves on trying to be a learning organization. We want to keep pushing ourselves and keep pushing the industry to keep advancing. And so we really try to put money where our mouth is with that. And so we set aside funds on a yearly basis for special studies such as this one. If you guys have ideas or something that you want to work on or something you think that we should work on, please reach out to us and pitch the idea, and we'll see what we can do to fund the effort for you. So thank you.